Hello and welcome back to another episode of the How to Buff series where we talk about characters we would like to change or buff, even though Mihoyo never will. This episode we'll be focusing on Alloy slash Aloy slash I don't care if I mispronounce her name no more. Because everyone got it for free, and she's like the least used character in the entire game. So that's how you know she's absolute garbage. Now when she first came out, a whole bunch of people had a lot of hype around her because she's gonna be a free 5-star character, and everyone was excited for the first crossover and a free 5-star, which they hoped was really good, and then they did it so dirty. So I'm gonna be talking about some things I would like to change about Aloy to make her more viable in the future. And before anyone goes to the comments, I do not know how much this will actually help the characters. These are just some fun little things I came up with while playing her, and some things I think will make her way better. And yes, I know my Aloy is only level 20, I just needed some recording footage for this video. So without further ado, let's go on to how to buff and change Aloy to make her actually useful. But first, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Aloy has no constellations. There's nothing for me to change here, there's nothing for me to talk about. It says that it'll come up in the future, but Mihoyo hasn't said a thing ever since she was released. And I don't even know if she's ever going to get them, to be honest, from the looks of Mihoyo. I mean, maybe she will since the new Horizon game just came out recently, so maybe with this next update they'll actually give her constellations. But since she does have constellations, of course her skills are going to be lacking in some way, so that is actually a little bit of a disappointment for Aloy players, but hopefully she gets her constellations soon. So this episode is actually going to be a little bit shorter because I can't talk about her constellations. She has none of them for me to change or buff, so I'm just going to skip over this part. And I know some people would say just wait till her constellations get introduced to see if she's good or not, but the base Aloy is actually so bad already. Like, you don't see a base Kaching or base Raiden and almost base anyone else be as bad as base Aloy, and she's a 5-star. So that is a huge problem, and that is why I would make these changes now. So with the constellation talk out of the way, hopefully they give us some soon, let's talk about her skills, passives, and her burst. Because base Aloy is just not good enough, so there's some changes that desperately need to be made. I'm not going to talk about the normal attacks too much because they're just normal attacks. There's not really much you can change about them unless you want to just change the scaling, which I'm not going to in this video. So we're just going to skip right over those. And now her elemental skill is the thing that probably needs the biggest change. Basically with this skill, Aloy will throw a grenade, and when it hits opponents, it will actually burst into mini cluster bombs. The little bombers can actually interact with other enemies, and if the enemy hits them, their attack will be decreased by a certain amount. Each of these stacks will increase the normal attack damage, and when she has 4 stacks, she'll get even more normal attack damage, and the normal attacks will be converted to cryo. Now this is cool and all, but there's a few changes I would like to make. Now those bomblets are really inconsistent to hit with enough. Those bomblets are really inconsistent to hit on opponents unless you're running Sucrose or Kazuha, because other than that, you're just really going to be playing and hoping that they actually run into them. Which means it's going to be hard to get your normal attacks to do more damage, and to change your normal attacks to cryo. So what I want to change is that when you hit someone with the base grenade of the skill, you get the full coil stacks immediately. So you automatically get your normal attacks converted to cryo, you get a whole lot of normal attack damage, and it's just going to be way easier to pop off. And the little bomblets will still do damage and decrease the attack of opponents. Just it's way too inconsistent to get that infusion, and it's just really tough unless you're running those 2 specific characters, because even Venti can't even swirl up items. This will give it a lot more consistency and just allow it to be much better. And now if we look at the stats of this skill, as you can see, her skill has a 20-second cooldown. Oh my lord, that cooldown is so long and it's so bad. I know you can win the sacrificial bow, but that doesn't really excuse the amount of cooldown you still have with this skill. Because tons of other abilities with a lot more damage and utility have a shorter cooldown than this. So I'm going to decrease the cooldown to at most 15 seconds. And then you guys can let me know if this should be a little shorter cooldown, or maybe if you think 15 seconds is the right approach. Because while I was playing her for this footage, I really felt that 20-second long cooldown. I felt like I could barely use it at all, no matter how many times I tried to switch to her and use it, it just wouldn't be there. And there we go, that's my first change, where you get the rushing ice state immediately, and the cooldown is reduced by 5 seconds. This will help him be more consistent, let her bomblets still have a little bit of utility, and allow her to actually use the skill a lot more often, cause Jesus. Now for her burst. Honestly, there's not really much I can really say about her burst, She just basically does cryo damage and a huge AoE in front of her, and there's really not much else to it. It has a low energy cost of 40, only has a 12-second cooldown, and its base damage is 359. So honestly, I'm probably gonna leave this talent alone. There's not really much you can really change here, unless you just want to increase the scaling of the burst, which I don't know about that because I don't really like just increasing the scaling of damage numbers during these How to Buff series. I really try to change the functionality of the ability rather than just more damage. Low cost, low cooldown, and a pretty good scaling. So I'm just gonna leave buffing on the burst to her Constellations if she even gets any. So yeah, I'm just gonna leave this alone. It's a pretty average burst overall, but there's not really much to change about it either. Her first passive is after receiving a coil effect from a skill, her attack is increased by 16%, and her other party members is increased by 8%. I'm not gonna change anything about this either because, you know, it's just an overall pretty good passive. Passives don't really have to be all that crazy good, and with the changes I make to the skill, she'll just get the attack increase right when she hits someone with the skill, so that's pretty helpful as well. So instead of trying to wait for a Abominate to be hit, you actually get it just from using the skill, making it more consistent once again. And then her second passive is while she's in the rushing ice state, it will increase the cryo damage bonus by 3.5% every 1 second for a maximum of 35%, because the rushing ice effect lasts 10 seconds, so she'll always guaranteed get this 35% anyway. So once again, no changes need to be made here, pretty good passive, lets her do more damage, and it's pretty nice. So with all these changes, I made Aloy really elemental skill oriented, so when she uses her skill, a whole lot of her other kit starts activating and working really nicely with each other. Because after you use the skill, you get infused with cryo, you start getting more attack, you get more cryo damage bonus, your normal attacks are infused with cryo and do more damage, and now you can use your burst at the end of the effect so you can get the most damage out of it too. I think this speeds up her ease of use by a lot and makes her consistency way better for the game. And then some of the people who want to get really skilled with Aloy can type her abilities really nicely to get the most damage out of her burst, her normal attacks, her skills, and everything else. And there we go, those are all the changes I would make to Aloy in Genshin Impact. Once again, the Constellations aren't here, so we'll have to wait to see if those Constellations will be super helpful. But until then, I think these changes really did help her out. And will Mihoyo ever buff her? No. Is it fun to talk about? Yes, so which is why I made this series. And if you guys have any other ideas for Aloy, leave them down in the comments, because the more input the better, and then we can see what her best kit would be. So yeah, other than that, that's all for me. I hope you guys enjoyed another episode of How to Buff, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.